Good day, everyone. Welcome to the Summit Sessions podcast. Today, I have with me the iconic American singer, songwriter, and poet, renowned casino developer, multiple award winning. He's also an author and journalist, television personality, and so much more. Mr. Gary Green, how are you today?
I am wonderful. And all of those accolades you listed, what it really means is I have the world's shortest attention span. So I do something and go, yeah, that was boring. Let's move to the next one. Less than accolades, that was testimony to my lack of attention span.
That's great, though. You have your list is extensive. That was just a few that I named off, but inducted into the California Music Hall of Fame, recognized in the Congressional Record. You were issued a special citation by Governor of Maryland. I mean, it seems like you do everything.
It comes with being old, and having that short attention span. It means that I've had lots of years to do lots of different things. And some of those latter things that you talk about, the Hall of Fame, the Congressional Record, the from Governor Moore in Maryland citation, those things happened so long after the actual activities. It was like history catching up with itself. Said, oh, yeah, that guy in the 70s, I read about him. Yeah. And so a lot of the things that I was cited for, especially in the Congressional Record, were things that I did in the 70s and 90s. But it's really cool that things that were part of a struggle for me then, and I was going, oh my God, how am I going to get through the day? Here, 50 years later, people are going, hey, that was pretty cool back then. And in hindsight, it was.
I think that's awesome, though. Now, I want to go into your early life and career, and I would like for you to share with us insights into your early life in Hamlet, North Carolina, and how it influenced your diverse career path.
Wow, you did your homework. That's very cool. So so I was born in Hamlet, which is it's a railroad village, or at least it was a railroad village then. It's where two major rail lines ran together. My father was an electrician, a signal maintainer for the Seaboard Coastline Railroad. That was the railroad that ran from New York City all the way down to Miami. So anybody that wanted to come to Florida for vacation before the era of air travel hopped on a Seaboard train and down to Florida. My father maintained those signals along there. So I grew up in that. Well, I didn't even grow up there. We lived there for about 6 months. And this was the early 19th, and polio was still a thing then. There was no vaccine. Dr. Salk's vaccine wasn't available. And we lived in a duplex house. Our neighbors next door, the kid there developed polio. So my parents, like many parents of the era, said, oh my God, let's get the hell out of here. So at less than 6 months old, we moved to Atlanta and worked out of the railroad yard in Atlanta. And the truth is, even though that was our base, the truth is we traveled with my father during those years. So, if you said for a folk singer, call Central Casting and ask them to put together the perfect background for somebody to be a folk singer, guess what? I grew up on the rails. I grew up on the railroad, riding railroad trains, talking to the guys in the caboose, talking to engineers. So, I grew up with that. When my father, by the time I had a brother born, when I was 4 years old, my father left the railroad and became a salesman, and we moved up to East Tennessee, a little town called Kingsport, right in the middle of Appalachia up there. And my father had a sales territory that traveled through East Tennessee, Western North Carolina, southeastern Virginia, up into eastern Kentucky, up where all those coal mines were up there. So I grew up seeing a lot of poverty up there. I was very comfortable in the perceived middle class of the big city of Kingsport. And I'd go up there and I'd see, the way people lived up in deep Appalachia around those coal mines and everything. And, for a kid, preschool and just starting school, this was a profound impact on me. I mean, I was like, what the heck? How do people live? Let me tell you, some of these houses, these people were so poor. How poor were they? Now, these people were so poor that instead of window panes in their windows, they had newspapers put in there to keep the wind from blowing through. I mean, we're talking severe poverty. And these are people that were working people. They were working in the mines, but their wages were so bad that they had to live like that. And here was the bizarre thing that struck my naive little boy mind that, even though you can hear I'm Southern and was raised in the South, I just couldn't grasp it. This poverty I just described to you this was the white working community. When you went into the minority communities, when you went into the Black community, they would like to have lived in a nice house where you had newspapers for windows. It was even worse over there. And as we would travel through there, as my father would go into a town, I'd just wander around. And sometimes as a little kid, I'd wander down into a coal mine, which I had no business doing. But I'd wander those neighborhoods. I'd talk to those people. And I guess I was like a sponge. I absorbed a lot of that. So, in those early days, it was a lot, like they say those are your impressionable years. Yeah, I had all the normal middle class, lower middle class things going on back in Kingsport, going to school and everything. But traveling with my father and my mother, it was a whole different world up there. And it was something that impacted me for my entire life. Very. So, yeah, I mean, I could talk all day about it. I mean, I'll jump through life and get to adulthood. We moved from East Tennessee, father's job. We eventually moved to Nashville in my early teen years. Nashville was a different place then than it is now. I mean, country music was really the primary business there in Nashville. And I was very fortunate at 13, 14, 15 years old. I could go to the old Grand Ole Opry building when it was in downtown Nashville. And I was a little kid, so nobody really took me too seriously. So I got to know the stars backstage where they would come outside to drink and smoke. And they started inviting me in, sending me on errands with them. So I got to know a lot of those early country stars. But again, I was the kid that ran errands for them. But still, I'm there absorbing all this stuff. When I was 16, right after I turned 16, we moved to a little town in North Carolina, Gastonia, North Carolina. Just before we moved, I panicked thinking, oh my God, I'm from Tennessee. I'm from Nashville, Tennessee, and I can't play guitar. Yikes. I could play piano. My mother was a piano teacher, a church organist, church pianist. So I could play piano since I was like 3 or 4 years old. But how can you be from Nashville, Tennessee and not play guitar? So I got a friend before we left. I got a friend to give me a month's worth of guitar lessons. I practiced, learned to play guitar. We moved to North Carolina, where I started writing songs, playing guitar, and once again absorbing the world around me. I would go to the library and check out records and bring them home. You could check out records like books from libraries in those days, and I'm talking vinyl records. And in doing that, I stumbled across a woman who was from that town, Gastonia. She had been a single mother of 9 children, and she had worked in a textile mill in Gastonia, Gaston County there. And she lived in poverty that rivaled what I described to you earlier from eastern Kentucky and up into coal mines. It was bad stuff. And she was a single mother, and the guy she was a white woman, but the guys she dated were mostly black guys. So the mills that owned the housing wouldn't allow her to live in mill housing because she wasn't purely white. So she lived in it's hard to believe. So she lived in the black community there, which was even more poverty. She was an early organizer of the labor union down there, and she played guitar. She wrote songs about her life, about her plight, about her children. And every union meeting started with her singing those songs that she had written. Well, her songs and these union meetings became so popular that the owners of the mill, the local police, and some other influences decided that this woman was a huge danger to the status quo, and there was a chance of the union winning the election. So on the 14th day of December in 1929, on her way home from a union meeting, they assassinated her. They killed her. And, I was learning this as a 10th grader in high school there in that town. And besides the depth and passion and tragedy of this story, the other thing that really hit me is, how do you write a song so powerful, so impactful, that people want to kill you because of your poetry? What the heck is that all about? I mean, how do you? So I'm listening to her songs, and she never recorded, but the great folk singer Pete Seeger recorded a number of her songs. And so I'm listening to Pete Seeger recordings of her songs, and I'm thinking, frankly, yeah, these songs are okay, but they're not that good. I mean, it's nothing that I would kill somebody over. You know what I'm saying? But I mean, this just really impacted me that somebody had written a song powerful enough that they got her killed. How does that happen? And that started me on a whole different progression in life and with music and seeking what I wanted to do, trying to figure out, what do I want to be when I grow up, even though I was 16 years old. And, going back to my Nashville influence, when I say I got to hang out with some of those people at the Opry and that it was a small town in Nashville, I mean, I was very fortunate. As I look back on it now, it's a much bigger deal now than it was back then. But as I look back on it now, I can tell you things that I did then as a 14, 15-year-old that you would genuinely say, wow, that's pretty cool. For example, I was invited over to Johnny Cash's house to sit on the floor in his living room and pass the guitar around the room and trade songs with people in the room. And besides JR, besides Johnny Cash being in the room, Chris Christopherson was in there. I mean, again, growing up in Nashville, and at the time, it's no big deal. It's like people in your neighborhood you go hang out with. Now, granted, Mr. Cash was my father's age, but he liked me. I was a young teen, and he liked me. He saw something in me. So those are the kind of songs I'd been concentrating on writing later when I'd moved to North Carolina. But now, with the story of this union organizer's woman named Ella Mae Wiggins, I was like, this changes everything. It is possible to write songs that are so powerful that if you can't change the world, at least you can impact people enough that they get so bothered by them they want to kill you. And so that between that and the things that I'd seen in Appalachia and things I'd absorbed growing up, that sort of shaped the next years of my life. And so the day I graduated from high school, I took off back to Nashville to try to pitch songs in Nashville. My new songs that were about what I saw in the world around me, about things going on in the world then. And we're talking the early 70s. So I was writing songs at that point in the period of time from the late 60s to the early 70s. And think about what was going on in the world. First of all, the Vietnam War was going on. The civil rights movement was at its height. The labor movement was struggling. Environmental movement was in its very early days. And so I'm writing about all these things that are impacting people of my generation, young people like that. So I go to Nashville thinking I'm going to be welcomed back as the return of the prodigal son. But what I found out in Nashville when I got to Music Row in Nashville was they didn't want to hear that. I was too dangerous. I was too political. As I would go knocking door to door, most places I'd get thrown out, or they would ask questions like, so tell me, son, I listened to your tape here. When are you going to get a haircut? I see, that's really germane. In fact, the only two people really encouraged me in Nashville a lot. One of them was Christopherson, who I'll never forget what he said about my songs. He said, that's righteous, man. That's the kind of thing me and my friends like listening to. They're going to kill you here in Nashville, but great songs. I mean, that was encouraging, but it didn't help in trying to be a songwriter and wanting a career. The other person that was very helpful to me was Jerry Reed. Jerry Reed was a country singer who people probably remember him best, not as a singer, but as a movie star. He was the truck driver in the Smokey and Bandit movies with Burt Reynolds and all those movies in the 70s and 80s. At any rate, I had a song that he really liked. He wanted to record. He said, but if he did record it, they'd chase him out of Nashville. There was no way he could do it. So once again, I'm being discouraged. Christopherson told me that I should record my songs myself. And my reaction was, man, I can't sing. I'm not a singer. I'm a writer. And Christopherson said to me, have you ever heard Bob Dylan? Good point. Good point. And then Christopherson said, have you ever heard me sing? Another good point. He wasn't that hot of a singer either. So that started me in a different direction. And several people in Nashville, including Chris and Jerry Reed, said that I should go to California or to New York and pitch my songs there and pitch myself, not just try to get other people to record my music, but pitch myself. Right during this same time, I left Nashville. I mean, I was chased out of town. I decided to take my parents' advice and go to college. So I'd already been accepted at several schools around the country. and I decided to accept the offer from the University of Tennessee. It made perfect sense because I was there in Tennessee. I was close to the music business, blah, blah, blah. So I went to school at the University of Tennessee, and three events happened that really changed everything in my life and brought about everything else that happened. I enrolled to school to major in journalism. It was the era of Watergate, and it was the era of newspaper reporters being heroes and changing the world. And God knows our world needed changing at the time. And I thought, as a journalist, if I can't make it as a musician, as a journalist, maybe I can help and change the world. So I enrolled in journalism. One night I'm in school, and after classes, I'm looking off in the distance, and I see some big arc spotlights off in the distance somewhere. And that usually meant there was a grand opening of something or a premiere of a movie or something. So I figured, okay, cool. I'm going to go see what that is. I drive out there, and it's a Chevrolet dealership where they're introducing that year's models of cars, which was of no interest to me. And as I'm getting ready to leave, I went, oh, this was a bummer. There is a flatbed trailer with amplifiers and microphones on it. And I'm thinking, okay, there's going to be music going on here. I've got to check this out. Now, you got to get the picture at the time. This is Knoxville, Tennessee, East Tennessee, very early 70s. It's still very country. It's very redneck. People have greasy hair, and, it's that kind of era. I'm a hippie. I've got hair down to my elbows, and a leather jacket with fringe on it, tie-dye. I'm a hippie. And so I figured, well, I'm going to stay here and listen to the music. So this big, long Cadillac Brougham pulls up, and these four women get out, followed by this older woman. And I recognized her immediately from television, and her name was Maybelle Carter. And she was known at that time to the world as Mother Maybelle Carter. Mrs. Carter, Maybelle Carter, and this is not an exaggeration, this is very Googleable or Wikipediable. Maybelle Carter invented playing lead guitar. Nobody had ever played the melody on a guitar except classical musicians until this woman out of the hills of Appalachia came along. And she had a style of guitar playing where she would play the chords and the melody at the same time on the same guitar. It was just amazing, incredible. My entire guitar playing life, I had tried to imitate that style with no success whatsoever. And if you talk to almost any professional guitar player, and I don't care what kind of band they're in or where they play, they will all say at some point in time they tried to play the Carter family lick, which is what that's called, the way that she played. So here is this woman who invented playing lead guitar, and she's there with her daughters, and they're going to do a country music concert there on stage. So I've been watching her, listening to their records. She started recording her first record for RCA Records, the Carter family. There were three of them then. Was recorded in 1929, the same year Ella Mae Wiggins was killed. So I had been listening to their records my whole life and knew the songs. So about midway through a concert, she decides to take requests from the audience. And this audience is all very country, very rednecky. And here I am, this hippie, pressed right up against the stage. And I start calling out Carter family songs. And she's like doing a double take, like, what's with the hippie knowing all my songs? So she didn't just pick one of the songs that I was requesting. She played them all. And then when the concert ended, I was anxious to meet her in person and tell her I'd been a fan my whole life. And she was about as anxious to find out who this crazy hippie was that knew all of her songs and why did I know her songs. So she came down off the stage and we started talking. And as we started talking more and more, she said, well, let's go inside away from the crowd here. Let's go into the dressing room. You have time? Mother Maybelle Carter, the inventor of lead guitar, wants to know if I have time to go talk to her in her dressing room. Gee, let me think. So I go in with her. And as we talk, I said, I've always wanted to learn to play The Wildwood Flower, which was her best known song, with your style of playing. She said, well, let's see what you do. And she hands me her guitar. That guitar today, by the way, it's a world famous guitar. It's probably worth millions of dollars. It's it's behind glass in the Country Music Hall of Fame Museum in Nashville. But at the time she hands me that guitar, she comes around behind me. She puts her hands on my hands and starts showing me how to finger it and shows me what to do with my thumb and how to play that guitar. And she taught me to play the Carter scratch, the Carter lick that everybody's wanted to do. And for the rest of her life, which unfortunately was only about 5 or 6 more years, but the rest of her life, she and I stayed in, say, weekly correspondence back and forth, with her giving me remote guitar lessons and me trying my best to imitate the Carter family style. So that was the big thing that impacted my music at the time. The other thing that was going on right at that same time was the siege of Wounded Knee, South Dakota. There was a struggle on the Gala Sioux Reservation, the Lakota Reservation up in South Dakota, where there was a struggle basically between the U.S. government and the tribal elders. And it came down to a really bad situation where the tribal elders and the young children barricaded themselves in a church up there. And the United States government responded by sending, I wish I had the statistics in front of me to read to you, but it's available on the internet easily. They responded with the largest deployment of American troops since the Vietnam War. There were daily flyovers of jets. There were armored personnel vehicles. There were 3 divisions of the United States Army. There were snipers, tanks, and inside this church were 200 old people and kids who were all natives. They were all Indians. And the U.S. was there for this Indian uprising. And I mean, the story, it was overwhelming at the time and still is, to tell you the truth. And so that impacted me deeply too. So I started raising money through concerts to support those people up there. And depending on whether you believe the FBI report or other reports, I either donated that money to buy blankets and food for them, or I used that money to rent a truck and fill it with arms and somehow sneak through the blockade that the Army had up there and deliver weapons to them. Not sure how I would have got through that blockade, one guy in a U-Haul truck. But if I was that good and could fool the whole U.S. Army, more power to me. At any rate, shortly after that, I started noticing I was being followed everywhere. What a surprise. Then when I would get bookings at a concert or something, the promoters of the concert would get visits from government agents saying, this guy's a dangerous radical. He's not really a musician. He's here to be a rabble rouser. So my bookings started drying up, and I started playing then for more and more genuinely radical organizations. I played for the American Indian Movement, of course. Played for the Black Panther Party, played for a number of anti-war groups. I played for Southern Christian Leadership down in Atlanta, which was Dr. King's organization. Dr. King had been killed by then, and head of it. And Dr. Abernathy asked me to come down several times. And once, incidentally, while he was thrown in jail, he wanted to be singing outside jail. At any rate, the more I played at those kind of gigs, the more I was followed, the more it became obvious that there were very scary looking trench coat people. And it was a strange time. It was a very strange time. Meanwhile, while all that's, I'm continuing to try to pitch songs and try to get recorded myself. One place I had never submitted a tape was to Folkways Records in New York. The reason I had not is Folkways, it was like the golden carrot out there. Folkways was the record label that Woody Guthrie had recorded on. Bob Dylan recorded on it initially. Pete Seeger, these songs, artists, these musicians. Other people that had voice recordings on Folkways Records. There were recordings of W.E.B. Du Bois. Dr. King was recorded on that. John F. Kennedy was recorded on Folkways Records. The speeches of Franklin Delano Roosevelt were on the label. I mean, this was a big-time label. This was the serious stuff. And so I never sent a tape to them because I was scared to death of being rejected like I had been in Nashville. And if I was rejected by Folkways, that would just be the devastation that I couldn't take it anymore. That would have been the end. So I was in New York for something else. I had a tape with me. And I thought, well, I might as well do it and get it over with and shatter my dream. So I dropped the tape off at Folkways Records to the reception. Normally, the way it worked, you could bring in a too chicken to do that. Tape off and got the heck out of there. And 4 days later, when I was headed back down south, I figured I better stop by and pick up my tape and take it home. So I called the Folkways office, and a woman answered the phone. And she said, I said, I need to pick up my tape. And she said, okay, what's your name? We get lots of tapes. I said, my name's Gary Green. And there's silence for a minute. She said, Gary Green, we've been trying to contact you. Mr. Ash wants to see you immediately. Mo Ash was the founder of that label and the president of it. Are you in New York now? Yes, ma'am, I am. Can you come here now? Mo Ash, the founder of this most important record label, wants me to come to his office. Okay. So I go to his office and I go in and I'm sitting in this guy's office. He's an older, short, fat Jewish guy, wears glasses down on the end of his nose like this, and he looks at you over top of his glasses. And so he puts on my tape. And the first song on my tape, I had recorded an old country song using the Carter family style lick. And it wasn't one of my songs. It was a cover of a song about a train wreck called The Wreck of the Old 97. And he played about, I don't know, 30 seconds of it. And he turned off the tape machine and he looked at me over those glasses. And he said, young man, this is a song about a train wreck that was so tragic, people are still singing about it 50 years later, and you've turned it into a square dance. Don't ever do that again. That's terrible. Thinking, well, I'm screwed. This is over with. He fast forwards the tape and he gets to the next song. The next song was one that I wrote, and it kicks off before it goes into the guitar part. I play a kazoo. Yeah, really, a kazoo. Tick, 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 right? So I kick it off with the kazoo. He stops the tape again. He looks at me. Young man, is that a kazoo I hear? Yes, very good. So he listens into the entire tape. He finishes the tape. He looks at me again, and he says, would you like cash or a check? Excuse me? Cash or a check for what? The advance for your first album, of course. Why am I getting an advance for an album? His word, your first album. Whoa. Let me tell you, I was in near poverty. I needed money really, really bad. I needed cash bad. But my father was a sales guy, and I understood marketing, and I understood the value of being photographed holding a check from Folkways Records. So I told him I had no way of cashing it, but I told him I needed a check. So he wrote me a check. Which, immediately thereafter, after I left, my brother was with me. I went down out of his office onto the street. His office was behind Lincoln Center, so we were in Midtown. And so we went out in front of Lincoln Center with me. From that, things sort of steamrolled. And I'm doing a lot of talking, and you're not asking questions, but am I doing okay here? Sure. Telling you the story. Okay, so I'll keep up with the story here till we get to quasi-modern times. First album came out about 6 months later, and Mr. Ash had been asking me to move to New York. And lots of people in the folk music community, including the legendary Pete Seeger, had been asking me to move to New York. Well, maybe I'll go visit New York again and see if it's a place I want to move to. Stand out front of Essex, my guitar case open, my guitar and a little bowl in front of me for people to throw coins in. I'm singing my songs, nobody's stopping. So I said, well, I'm going to sing some songs that maybe they know better. You know, I said earlier, my mother was a church organist, a piano player. So I'm singing old gospel songs. So I start out and I'm singing Swing Low, Sweet Chariot. So I give a guitar chord for it, and I'm singing the first line without the guitar. I just hit the chord one time and I'm doing, well, I looked over Jordan and what did I see? And before I can go into the next line of it, I hear this bass voice, powerful bass voice behind me, sing out the next line, coming for to carry me home. It's like this beautiful, powerful voice. And I turn around, and it's Reverend Frederick Douglass Kirkpatrick, the troubadour of Southern Christian leadership, the guy that was at the Poor People's March. And I look at him, and he said, don't stop, keep going. And he joined in with me. And so for the next 4 hours, we hung out on the street singing old spirituals. And that convinced me to move to New York, I got to tell you. So I moved to New York. Shortly after I got there, I go by the Folkways Records office to check in, see how my album's doing. And Mr. Ash says to me, are you ready to record your second album? Yeah. Okay. So we recorded the second album while I was there. And then he starts asking me if I'd like to produce some albums for him. Mr. Ash had an interesting philosophy that a lot of independent record labels had. It's the same philosophy that Sun Records had down in Memphis that created rock and roll, that discovered Johnny Cash and Jerry Lee Lewis and Elvis Presley and all those people. The saying that Sam Phillips, founder of that label, had said was, if you're not saying something different, then you've got nothing to say. And Mo Ash had the same philosophy. If you're saying something different, then you need to be recorded. If you sound just like everybody else and you're saying the same thing, then I'm not interested in you. And Mo really felt that I was saying something different, that I had something to say, and he wanted the world to hear that. So in addition to recording me, he asked me to produce other albums for him. So I had moved into the apartment that belonged to Broadside magazine. Broadside was a folk music magazine that was founded when I was a little kid, founded in the early 60s on the upper west side of New York, West 98th, between Broadway and Amsterdam in New York. And it had been founded by this couple, Sis Cunningham and Gordon Friesen, by Pete Seeger, Bob Dylan, Phil Oakes, Janice Ian, and a handful of other people who went on to be legendary. And by the 70s, when I'm there, it was on its last leg. They were both in their late 60s, Sis Cunningham and Gordon Friesen were. And they wanted somebody that helped revitalize the magazine. Well, you know what? I had a background in journalism from the University of Tennessee. I'm a folk music guy. I'm doing political folk music. So it was perfect. So I moved in with them and I start working on that. And they're saying the big thing is we need to raise money. So we're talking about how to raise money for the thing. And I said, well, why don't we take all the people that you've discovered over the years, which is a long list. Take those people and do a huge concert. So they get very excited. The concert will raise money. We decide we're going to lease Madison Square Garden to do the concert. They tell me I'm in charge of that. So I have no idea. I'm a kid. I'm 22 years old, 23 years old. I have no idea how to lease Madison Square Garden. I had no idea how much it would cost, that you've got to have insurance, you got to have cops, you got to do all kinds of stuff. So I called Madison Square Garden with my accent, and you think I have a Southern accent now. In those days, I talked like this a whole lot, and so I'm calling up Madison Square Garden saying, how you boys doing? I want to talk about renting your hall from you. They did not take me terribly seriously until I said that the concert's going to be headlined by Bob Dylan and named some other people. And they're like, oh, well, when can you come by? So I went by to see them, and they quoted to me what it was going to cost. Now, this is in 1977 money, and it was going to be like $155,000 or something like that, which is a lot of money by today's money. It was a lot of money then, too, to rent the thing, and it had to pay it in advance. We didn't have any. If we had $150,000, man, we wouldn't need to do this fundraiser. We'd put out the magazine. So then back at Sis and Gordon's apartment, I'm sort of bummed out about it. And they said, well, you know, we could raise some money by putting out an album of that Bob Dylan tape. I'm like, what Bob Dylan tape? I heard a tape that a crazy guy, absolutely a crazy guy, had taped telephone calls between himself and Bob Dylan. They had this tape of these calls and very contentious conversations between them. Sis Cunningham says, well, call up Bob and tell him what we're going to do. I'm like, yeah, call up Bob Dylan, sure. She said, you don't know him? No. But she picks up the phone, goes through a little black book. She calls up Bob Dylan, tells him he'd already agreed to do the concert. So he says, yeah, go ahead. See what you can do. So take the tape over to Mo Ash and says, I want you to produce. So we go through that whole process. We had no budget for this album. No money, zero. In fact, for the cover of the album, we couldn't even afford typesetting. We used transfer letters. Transfer letters were little letters that you would buy at a office supply store, and you'd put them on paper with a popsicle stick. And that was our typesetting. I mean, this was poverty. So we put this album together. The album came out. It was a huge success the first day it was out. The second day it was out, CBS Records, Columbia Records, which is what Bob Dylan recorded on by then, $636 million lawsuit against Folkways, Broadside Magazine, and me. as the producer of the album, and got a cease and desist order, and against a number of record chains that were distributing the album. So all of the things that they alleged in this lawsuit was that it was a conspiracy, the type, style, and font that we used on the album cover to make people think that this was a performance by Bob Dylan. Keep in mind, I already told you why we used that font. It's the only thing we had with transfer letters. They also said that I was practicing medicine without a license, because on the liner notes of the album, I had said, this is a study of Bob Dylan, the man, not Bob Dylan, the songwriter, the poet, or the superstar. And the lawsuit alleged that I had said Bob Dylan had multiple personalities and was schizophrenic, and that was practicing medicine without a license. No, seriously, they put that in a lawsuit, if you can believe that. So, by the way, $636 million in 1977 money. If you do an online calculator of what that is today, that's a little over $3 billion today. So they sued me for what today would be a $3 billion lawsuit, which is insane. I didn't have that kind of money. So it was a bad situation. Then, to make matters worse, the FBI shows up at Folkways Records and seizes all of the copies of that album that are in the warehouse. And they have a warrant. They seize all of those. Then they meet with the attorneys for Columbia Records and tell them to take me off of the lawsuit, because if this goes to court, then certain information about surveillance will come out in the court case, and that could endanger national security. Somehow, I had lived up to what Ella Mae Wiggins did. I had written songs powerful enough that people were threatened that I was somehow a danger to national security. I was a danger of national security because I objected to the Army occupation of Wounded Knee. I objected to the treatment of people in the South, in Appalachia, in poverty. I objected to segregation in our schools in the South. That made me a threat to national security. So they replaced me on the lawsuit as a John Doe. Eventually, as this was going through the court system, everything's on hold for me. I went back south. I've got to get a job. I've got to find a way to live. I got a degree in journalism. So I went to work as a newspaper reporter and eventually an editor. I hired an attorney to represent me separate from the rest of the case. And we decided to file a countersuit against Columbia Records and against Bob Dylan. We sued them for the same amount of money, $636 million, for destroying my career as a record producer, whatever the hell that meant. At any rate, the whole thing was settled out of court when I got a call late one night from someone purporting to be Bob Dylan, who may or may not have been Bob Dylan, saying, look, this whole thing got out of hand. This was lawyers. And I was really pissed off at the guy that did the interview. How about you forget your suit, I'll forget my suit, and this all goes away and we all walk away friends. So I'm very happy to do that. CBS Records lawyers drew up paperwork on it. The paperwork required that the master recording that Folkways had be burned in the presence of CBS attorneys. So Mr. Ash and the CBS attorneys went to an incinerator there in New York City, tossed in a tape, and it burned. 3 days later, Mr. Ash sent by FedEx to me the master tape, which I have in my possession as we speak right now. So that was interesting. So about 2 weeks after, and I'm a newspaper editor and reporter, about 2 weeks after all of this happens, I get a call to come visit the mayor late at night at his office. And he wants to talk to me about several things, including ownership of the newspaper. So I go to see the mayor. And I walk in, and before I tell you what happens, I'm going to tell you that this is not a G-rated conversation, so you may want to put beeps in it when you edit this thing. So I walked in, and he starts screaming and cussing at me really bad, and I'm like, whoa, what's going on here? And he tosses me a canvas bag, and I opened the bag, and it's full of $100 bills. And I said, what the hell? And before I get hell out of my mouth, his door comes open, and 3 cops come rushing in. One of them holds a pistol right up against my temple. and he cocks the thing. I mean, at this thing, if he had sneezed, he would have blown my brains all over the mayor's office. And he screams at me, "We finally got you, you commie bastard. Let's see you go to the Grand Ole Opry now, you motherfucker." So, yeah. So here's the good news. The good news is if I wanted to write songs that were dangerous enough to get somebody killed, I did it. The bad news is I did it. They took me to jail. They didn't question me. Well, yeah, the only thing they questioned me about is they wanted a list of other political folk singers and to know what movements we were involved in. Then they took me to jail. No charges against me. They didn't press any charge. They locked me in the county jail. As soon as they left, the sheriff came in, took me out of the jail cell into his office. And he said, "You know, this is a political setup." He said, "You and I have some mutual friends. And I have heard that tonight in jail, you're going to be killed. One of the inmates is going to stab you and you're going to die. So I'm going to let you out of here." So the sheriff helped me escape. He told me to go to Nashville, which was the closest big city. So I drove toward Nashville. As I crossed his county line into the next county, I was arrested by a deputy in the next county who took me to jail on the same charges. Fortunately, the sheriff there was also a political supporter. And so he came to me and said, "Look, I've been supporting the civil rights movement my entire life. I know who you are. I know who your friends are. I'm going to get you out of here and get out of Tennessee as quickly as you can." So the people who had arrested me then filed federal charges against me for interstate flight to avoid prosecution. And now I am a wanted fugitive and on the up to New York and had a secret meeting with William Kunstler. William Kunstler was probably at the time the most famous civil rights lawyer in America. He had defended the Chicago Seven. He defended the Black Panther Party. It can go on and on with the famous civil rights cases that Bill Kunstler handled. And he agreed to be my attorney. Deal with the prosecutors in Tennessee. And the deal was they didn't want me back because they didn't want the publicity. The idea was to get rid of me any way they could. So if I would agree to stay out of the state and never go back, they would agree to drop the charges once the term of a current grand jury ended, which was 4 more years. But in the meantime, they would keep the charges in the federal computer. Just in case I decided to come back, they'd have that leverage against me. So we agreed to that deal. I went back to Baltimore, and Bill Kunstler told me, just, don't do anything that you're going to get arrested. But other than that, go about your regular life, be Gary the folk singer, and do what you can do. Meanwhile, to raise money for my legal defense, Folkways Records decided to put out a 3rd album. And as we were recording the 3rd album, I decided to just be the smartass that I am. So we titled the 3rd album, "Gary Green is Still at Large." So we put out that album playing there. I started touring, and it was reviewed by the New York Times. And I was singing all of my very incisive political songs, my anti-war songs, my civil rights songs. And the reviewer for the New York Times reviewed the gig and said, "You should come hear why they call Gary Green the outlaw folk singer." So I adopted that moniker from then on. I thought, "Ooh, cool, outlaw folk singer, double meaning. I like it." So I became known as the outlaw folk singer. Things were going really good until the pressure of everything I've just described to you was intense. Being followed by federal agents that want to kill you, being arrested and being told by a high sheriff, sitting sheriff, "Look, they're going to murder you in jail." Being told by the leading civil rights attorney, "Look, just don't do anything that gets you arrested. You'll go back to Tennessee and be murdered." I was on stage in my coffee house one day. The door was closed, plate glass door was closed. This coffee house was in inner city Baltimore. In 21st century parlance, we would say it was in a good. It was in a less than nice neighborhood in inner city Baltimore. Okay, so there were these 2 white guys that had rented a room above the bar next door, and they were good and drunk. and they had taken a barbecue grill and put it on the sidewalk between the bar and the coffee house, and they were cooking 2 steaks on it. Both their steaks were gone from the grill. Surprise, where do you think you are? But they were unhappy that their steaks had been stolen. And so they started screaming. And they were screaming every racial epithet that you could possibly imagine, and some that even I had not heard. And that did it for me. I exploded. I slammed my guitar down on stage. I opened the door of the coffee house. I bounded down those steps. I went out there and I started. I'm up in the, they're bigger than I am. I was a little guy. And I'm up in their face and I'm screaming and spitting at them. And I'm saying, this is the reason I'm not in the South anymore. You get away from this bullshit. And I'll be damned if I'm going to listen to that in Baltimore City. And so then they started calling me all sorts of names. And one of them took a swing at me. And so I picked up their charcoal grill and I shoved it into one pieces. So that burned him. I figured that was the end of him. So then I turned to the other guy and he started toward me. And so I turned and I put a roundhouse kick in his solar plexus and he went down. And I figured that's it. I got rid of him. My temper had exploded. I'm cool. I'm going back inside and go back to my gig. So I walk back up the steps, go in the coffee house, close the door, walk in. And one of the guys gets up and decides to come after me. And he's pounding on the coffee house door, screaming those same words again. I turned around and I hit him just as hard as I could. He went down and that was the end of it. The bad news is, if you listen to this description I just gave you, I had closed the door when I went in and I hit the guy. I didn't say I opened the door to hit him. I hit him through the plate glass. My fist went right through that plate glass. So when it went through, it was okay. When it came out, the blood is not just bleeding, it's bleeding in time to my heartbeat, which means I've sliced an artery. So I turned to the barmaid and I yelled her to toss me a towel so I can tie a tourniquet on it. So I'm trying to tie this tourniquet and I went down. And I woke up briefly when they were loading me onto the helicopter. And one of the EMTs said, there's no rush. He's lost too much blood. This one's not going to make it. I regained consciousness again in the hospital. The surgeon had brought me around and he's got my hand up, my right hand. And he's got my hand up and he wants me awake while he tries to reattach nerves in the hand. And they've got me awake. And so I'm wondering how bad it is. So I'm trying to ascertain from the doctor how bad it is. And he has the worst bedside manner in the history of the world. I look at him and I said, Doc, look, I'm a guitar player. And before I can finish the sentence, he looks at me and says, not anymore, you're not. And he was right. It sliced the nerves. And though those years, the 1980s, they had microsurgery and they could reattach nerves. But you can't reattach them in the right place in those days. So, not exactly the way it was. So, for example, this is my right hand. I flip this finger like this. I don't feel it on this finger. I feel it down here on my wrist. My nerves in my right hand are all screwed up like that. He couldn't reattach them properly. And I don't know if you can see on the camera, but there's a scar there and there's a scar there. And it did me in as far as being a musician. My career was over. Music was over. Fortunately, I'd been around the movement long enough that I had lots of friends that would hire me for jobs. And so I called friends in the labor movement, and I was hired by a large national labor union. And I went to work for that union in a key position for that union, doing work for them. Unable to play guitar, unable to play piano. My mother, incidentally, again, the music teacher, insisted that I could play and that she would be my physical therapy to insist that I play. And she worked with me. First, she gave me a bunch of books for left-handed piano. There was a famous composer in the 1700s that only had one arm, and he wrote a number of symphonies written for one hand. That didn't help. But she worked me so that I could work with my right hand. So meanwhile, I'm working for this union and we're coming back. One of my duties is I'm organizing a convention for them. I had this huge convention in the Bahamas. So we go down to the Bahamas. We have this big convention. So we weren't really worried about much of anything coming into the country. When we be out of the country and come back to the U.S., it was spot checking. I mean, there'd be 200 people on an aircraft. They might check 5 of them. Everybody else just comes through. Well, luck of the draw, they checked me to avoid prosecution and armed and dangerous. I demand to call my lawyer. They say you haven't been admitted into the United States, so therefore you have no constitutional rights. Take me into a little office. They handcuff me to an office chair, handcuff me behind my back to an office chair, and get on the phone. And this is on a Sunday evening, and call the FBI agent on duty. They want him to take me right away. So he needs to call and find out what's going to happen. They're extraditing me, et cetera, et cetera. He says, meanwhile, I'm sitting there, constitutional rights, 4, 5, 6 hours later. And he says, need to get his lawyer because they don't want him in Tennessee. Well, what do we do with him? I don't know. So they finally let me make a call. I get Bill Kunstler on the phone. He gets on the call with the prosecutor from Tennessee. They do a conference call with the FBI and with the Border Patrol, and they say, no charges against him are dropped. There's no charges. We do not want this guy coming back to Tennessee. Kunstler's telling them on the call, it's coming out. So charges are dropped. They turned me loose. Did they apologize? No. Did they say, sorry, we kept you all this time? No. What they said is, get the hell out of here, kid. It's cool and everything, but that pretty much ended my career in the labor movement because, it's bad to have a labor union official that's been arrested as an international fugitive. Sort of a bad thing. Let me run back to the coffee house for a minute, and then I'm going to shut up for a little bit. Back when I was running that coffee house, I was bringing in a lot to do in the business or part-time songwriters, etc. So I was in my coffee house doing a concert one night, and there was a older woman sitting in the corner who I had known in New York. He was called Panther 20, a famous civil rights case. Most of the Panther defended with the concert. She had defended herself, and he was so good. She wasn't a lawyer. She was so good. When she examined the other, she tricked him into admitting that he set the whole thing up, and it was all a setup to arrest the Panthers. So they were all acquitted, and she became relatively famous. At the time that I was in Baltimore, she had left New York. She was living in Baltimore, which I didn't know. I'd met her in New York during that case because I did a benefit for the Black Panther Party, and the money went to their defense. I gig, I walked up to her, we're hugging, talking, I haven't seen her in years. She said, well, I'm having a rough time. I've got 2 kids. And I said, yeah, I remember you had kids then. He just turned 15. And he's writing songs and poetry. And I want him to understand how political poetry works and that you can change the world with music and poetry. And would you meet him and talk to him about what you've done in your life, and maybe he'll learn from you? So I said, sure, bring the kid by. So she sends him by. He comes by himself. We talk for hours, and we really hit it off. And over the next few months, he starts coming in before the coffee house opens. He comes in 2 and 3 times a week, and we're spending hours together. And he's starting to, he's only 15 years old, but he's starting to develop some really powerful poetry, better than anything I ever read. He's really writing good stuff. And we got to be relatively close. This is all before I'm arrested. And I was, in fact, armed in those days. And nobody ever saw the guns. I kept them hidden really well. This kid was so street smart. I mean, his mother was a Black Panther leader, but that aside, he was street smart. He spotted that gun, and he asked me why I was going healed. And I mean, what a kid. So we talked, and we became really close up until I was arrested and couldn't come back anywhere and all of that. The reason I raise it is that he went on to be a lot more well-known than anyone I ever recorded or anyone else I ever booked. His name was Tupac Shakur. Yeah. So this was his early days. It's before he got involved with Jada and before he was involved with the Baltimore School of Arts. Tupac was he was a 15-year-old kid that was writing some incredibly powerful poetry and coming to terms with what was going on in our neighborhood there in Baltimore. Great kid. And it never occurred to me that I was any kind of influence on him, and I would argue that I wasn't. But in later years, especially when the governor of Maryland recognized me and the Hall of Fame recognized me, they credited me with at least helping shape the direction of his poetry. Certainly not the content or the power of it, because he was so much better poet than I ever was. But those were good days. At any rate, that sort of brought me up to modern times. There's a lot more that happened in the ensuing years, but I see that I've gone for over an hour here talking about those early days, and I know you're going to have to edit the hell out of this, but there you have it up until the 90s anyway.
I mean, no editing of it. It's good. It's very informative for everyone to hear. Now, your folk music albums are part of the Smithsonian Folkways collection.
Yeah, so here's what happened with that. In fact, this is a whole string of things that all happened. When Mo Ash was dying, founder of Folkways, the most important thing to Mo Ash and how his label was different than all the other labels. You know, if you were a musician and you recorded on any of the big labels, RCA, Columbia, any label, after sales dropped off, those albums disappeared. They would become out of print. This is before digital downloads, of course, and they just went away, and people's careers evaporated. Mr. Ash felt that it was extremely important that the people that he recorded, especially the people that had something to say, that their songs be available forever. So he never deleted anything from his catalog. Even if you only sold one album every 6 years, it was still in his warehouse and available. That was his philosophy of his record label. So when he was dying, and he knew he was dying, he met with the Smithsonian and he said, "Would you like to have this collection?" And when they saw the depth and breadth of what he had recorded over the years, they jumped all over wanting that collection. He said, "There's one caveat. It has to be available forever. No one can ever be deleted from the catalog." So the Smithsonian happily agreed to that. And so the albums, when Mr. Ash died, instead of being Folkways Records, it became Smithsonian Folkways Records. And so the songs, my albums, are today part of the Smithsonian collection. So, you know, a lot of times I'll do an interview and people will say, you know, what do you want to do as a legacy? Here's the deal. I got immortality. I have a legacy. My albums that I recorded in my 20s will be here 200 years from now because they're part of the Smithsonian collection. What greater legacy could I possibly hope for? I've been granted immortality. So yeah, the albums are part of the Smithsonian. I'm extremely happy with that, proud of that. Jumping over a bunch of stuff, the software stuff I did, the casino stuff I've done. I'll tell you that in 2023, late 2023, I was approached by an old friend of mine who is a music producer and booking agent. And she said to me, you know, you should consider recording again and some newer stuff and re-recording some of your older stuff with modern techniques. I'm like, man, nobody wants to hear me. And she said, no, you're legendary. And I rolled my eyes. Yeah, right. I'm a legend in my own mind. How's that? She said, no, you impacted so many people. And I said, name somebody I impacted. And so, of course, she rolls out Tupac. But I said, yeah, right. I mean, you know, he was a kid, but I don't think I had any impact on him. She said, you're cutting yourself short. And she starts naming all these people that I had contact with or knew over the years and things I'd done. Plus, during the casino portion of my career, in my showrooms, I booked so many people, not just political people, not just folky people. Man, I booked Tony Orlando and Dawn. I booked, you know, you name somebody in show business, and I booked. So she said, you know, you really should be in the Hall of Fame. So she started making arrangements, and then I got a call in early 2024 that the California Music Hall of Fame had voted to induct me. And so in April of 2024, I flew out to Temecula, California for the ceremony, and I was inducted into the California Music Hall of Fame. And, you know, it was weird because the people that were on the stage there, the other inductees, it was like real people. I mean, people that I knew because I had bought their records or had seen them on TV. They were famous people there. And then amidst all that, here's this little hillbilly folk singer with my little guitar, we each had to perform a song. And I wrote a song for my third album about a rock and roll star that kills himself, called that Burnout Rock and Roll. Sometime in first part of this century, maybe 2024, 2025, a guy named Frank Black, who was the frontman lead singer of a group called the Pixies that you might have heard of. Frank Black recorded that song on one of his albums, and it did extremely well. And so that song sort of got to be, it's not the song I would have picked to be my signature song, but it got to be really well known. And so I performed that at the Hall of Fame ceremony, and of course everybody in the audience recognized it. It was a very cool day out there. And then shortly after that Hall of Fame ceremony, Congresswoman Lois Frankel, I live in South Florida, I live in Palm Beach County, representing me here in Palm Beach County, introduced a proclamation to the United States Congress, and it's in the congressional record now, citing me, thanking me for my years of service to the anti-war movement, the civil rights movement, the LGBTQ movement, the environmental movement, and all the work that I've done over the years, as well as my music being in the Smithsonian and being part of the Hall of Fame. And then right after she did that, or right around the same time she did that, Governor Wes Moore of Maryland, somebody brought to his attention all the work that I had done at the coffee house there in Baltimore, and all of the good things that we had done organizing in the community. We did a lot of community organizing in Baltimore. And so he issued that proclamation. Those things happened. I finally recorded a new album. And for the past few months, this woman who brought it to me, Monica, has been putting together a bunch of actually famous people, not people like me that you've never heard of, actually famous people, and asked them to be musicians on the album with me. So sometime this year, we're going to go into the studio and record that album. There'll be some of my old songs and some new ones that I've come up with, and some really good Hall of Fame member musicians that people will recognize. The other exciting thing that's happened related to all of this is the actual induction of me to the Hall of Fame was done by a guy named Charles Everett. Charles was a guy, he is the last living person who worked at Folkways Records. Everybody else is dead that worked there. Charles's mother was that receptionist that I took my tape to. It turns out she wasn't just the receptionist. She was Moe's right hand. And Charles worked in the warehouse. He's the one that the FBI showed up at and took all of the Bob Dylan albums out of there. He's the only guy living. He did the actual induction thing, the speech and all of that. And then as he and I started talking, we started talking about all the things we had in common. Because he's the last living person from the Smithsonian, the pre-Smithsonian era of Folkways. And I was plugged into so many of the artists. And unlike a lot of the artists, I also produced records for Mo. Besides the Dylan record, I produced three other records for him that are other artists. And we decided, hey, maybe we should get together and do a podcast or a road show and call it Growing Up Folkways, because since his mother was the right hand there, he started really coming to the Folkways office when he was 7 years old and was there every day up until Mo died. And so he really knew Folkways inside out. I knew the artist for the most part inside out. And so we started thinking, this is a pretty cool thing. So we did what I'll call a pilot for it, and an outline for the series or for a live show of it. And we took it to the Smithsonian, and the Smithsonian decided to put their seal of approval on it and endorse the thing. So it's going to hopefully later this year, maybe early next year, it'll be on the Smithsonian website, series of interviews, and basically what they are, it's Charles and myself talking about those days and interviewing some of the artists that are still alive that remember those days. We jokingly say we have to do this in a hurry because Charles and I are among the youngest of the people, and we're both in our 70s. So the rest of the people that we're interviewing are sort of up there. So we have to do this in a hurry. That's the other exciting news that's going on right now.
Your achievement, it's an achievement amongst all your other achievements that you have. Now, you also got into the gaming industry. So, as vice president of marketing for the Trump organization, what
Yeah.
things did you implement to enhance the brand's presence in the gaming sector?
Ouch. What a question. Good question. And you did your homework. Holy crap. Run away from home. When I was growing up, I learned all the things a young man should know. Never burn a face card. All the important things you need. Then after my arrest, and after I left the labor movement, I'd been involved in the software industry, and we were very successful with an IPO in the late 1990s and did a lot of stuff. By the turn of the century, or at the end of the 90s, turn of the century, I needed a job. And so I decided I was going to explore the casino industry since I knew a hell of a lot about it. I had met Trump at a fundraiser a couple of years earlier. After our IPO, I got to be a fairly popular speaker at trade shows for technology events. And after one of them, Trump said, now I needed a job really badly. So I decided I wanted to go to work in casinos, and I didn't know anybody in casinos, so I decided to call Donald Trump, and bizarrely got put through to him. And I started out, Mr. Trump, you probably don't remember, wear custom Armani suits with cowboy boots and act like you. Okay, I guess you've got a point there. Okay. And I said, the reason I'm bothering you today is I'd like to go to work for one of your casinos in Atlantic City. He said, I'm sorry, I can't help you. I said, okay, well, thank you for taking the call. And he said, well, what do you think of California? Been there a lot? He said, I've got a casino out there. Can you go to work for it? So long story short, I went to work as vice president of marketing for hotels and casinos, focusing first on the casino, native casino in California, working with the tribe there, which made me extremely happy because of my background working with tribes from the Wounded Knee days and the sovereignty struggles for Native America. And what I learned about Trump, wasn't interested in the bottom line. He wasn't interested in the profit. He wanted the brand to happen. He wanted everybody to know that it was the Donald Trump. So my job was to enhance his brand every way that I possibly could. And I'm going to give you one story. It's sort of a long story, but it explains a lot about Trump today, as well as my involvement with him. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. We had a casino promotion where we had taken an old carnival promotion from the South. You'd have a live chicken in a cage, and the chicken would scratch a tic-tac-toe card, and the object was, could a player beat the chicken at tic-tac-toe? So we had updated this thing. Some friends of mine in Arkansas updated this thing so that what actually happened was there was a computer screen, tic-tac-toe board on it, and you're the player. You come up to it, tic-tac-toe against the chicken. So you put your X on there, touch screen, put your X on it or draw an O, wherever you want to do it. Once you do that, the chicken makes his mark and it shows up on the computer screen. Now it's your turn. Back and forth till the game's over. And the pitch is, I'll give you $10,000 if you can beat a chicken playing tic-tac-toe. I don't think you can beat my chicken. Okay, that's the way it works to the player. Here's what's really happening. It's totally computer controlled, totally controlled by the computer. The chicken's obviously not playing tic-tac-toe. What's happening inside the booth that you, the player, can't see is as soon as you make your mark on there, a little light turns on inside the booth. That chicken is trained that when the light comes on, it will go behind that little panel and it'll tap a plate back there. When it taps a plate, two things happen. First of all, food comes out of a little container. And so the chicken gets food. And secondly, it triggers the computer to make the computer's mark in the tic-tac-toe board. So that's how the game actually works. So because it's computer controlled, the casino side of it can control the payouts of it. I can make it pay out every person, pay out every 1 in a million people, anything I want it to. So the thing is, you beat my chicken and I'll give you $10,000. And we had it set for like 1 in every 2,000 people that played it would actually win $10,000. So Don, Mr. Trump's coming out to his casino with his name on it. And we're going to have him play against the chicken. This was the first season of The Apprentice TV show. And so he's going to play against the chicken. The chicken is going to beat him. And he's going to turn to the chicken and say, "You're fired." It's a famous line from the TV show. So we set the thing up, and I tell the guy that's in charge of the chicken and the computer, I say, set it up to pay out 1 in every 100 million. I don't want any chance of Don winning this damn thing. So Trump shows up, and he goes first. He puts an X in the upper right-hand corner. And so Chicken goes into the booth and puts an O in the center square. I'm looking at it going, oh, shit, this doesn't look good. So it's Don's turn, and he puts an X in the bottom left-hand. Guess what? The chicken can't possibly win. I mean, once those two moves are made, you know the game's over. So, in fact, Trump beats Chicken. I mean, it really was just weird as hell. He was the one that beat it. And we had rehearsed lines for him to say, "You're fired." We were going to give him a T-shirt to hold up that says, "I got beat by a chicken at the Trump casino." But instead, he won, and he totally panicked. So if you look at the pictures on the internet or anywhere else of that day, you can see him with his lips tight like this and me looking like, fuck. And what he did when he tightened his lips, he said to me, "What do I do now?" And I said, "Be happy, be happy." And so he turns around and he goes, "Yes, I won. I win everything." So we got all this national. We're still up Saturday Night Live. And we say, what if we send you Donald Trump, the star of The Apprentice, big New York real estate developer, owner of casinos, and we dress him up in a bright yellow suit to look like a chicken that beat the chicken at tic-tac-toe. And he comes out and does the chicken dance on Saturday Night Live. Well, of course they said yes. And you can find on YouTube out there somewhere of Donald Trump, the chicken dance. So you got to ask yourself, step back from the story I just told you. Why would anybody in their right mind put themselves through that? And the answer is publicity. It's all about the brand. We talked about that one time. And again, this is going to be the X-rated part, so get your beeper out. I said to him, "Aren't you worried about negative publicity?" And he said to me, "Look, as long as they don't know the name of the sheep you've been fucking, then you're fine. It's all good publicity." And if you'll think about his recent history, that is consistent with his recent history. And as far as what's going on with him today, Donald Trump is all about Donald Trump and the brand. There is no overriding philosophy. You know, as a lefty folk singer guy, I would like to tell you that this is an evil Elon Musk conspiracy of the far right. No, that's giving it too much depth. It doesn't have that depth. What it really and truly is it's about the Trump brand. It's all about value in the brand. So my job, I was vice president for Trump, was to enhance the Trump brand. Now, what I learned from that, from him, was a tremendous amount about branding and marketing and ways to some of the advanced technologies that we were using. They're cutting edge today. So 25 years ago, I learned that. I took it all to heart. And it occurred to me while I was working for him, you know, I don't really need to be doing this for Donald Trump. What if I did this for Native America? What if I did this for Indian casinos? What if I went back to my roots of Wounded Knee and took these techniques and taught them to the natives that own these tribal casinos, and we applied those things there? That was the remainder of my career in the casino industry, was doing that, working extremely close on tribal sovereignty and using this as a tool. And I'm really happy to say, in this day and age, today, the tribal casinos have advanced from being complete novices stumbling around in the dark to being far more advanced than most corporate casinos are today, and far more advanced than anything that I could have taught them. But also I'll say that, just like Tupac, I was able to give them some of that initial grain that allowed them to develop into the wonderful things they became and grow on their own. I can't take credit for it, and I wouldn't take credit for it, but at least I could help by sprinkling some of those seeds there. So, you know, that was really my casino role. But I have to give credit where credit's due. And a lot of what I learned on the marketing side of it, I learned from those years in the service of Trump. In those days, was he political? Well, let me tell you, he donated a tremendous amount of money to Bill Clinton and later to Hillary Clinton. He was a member of the Democratic. He was a registered Democrat, and he donated a lot of money to Democratic causes. In those days, it was nothing like the MAGA world of today and the stuff going on today. I will tell you that I still have a lot of friends that were said to me he had gotten a call from Trump the night of the election. Trump had called him and said to my friend, "Won this thing. What the hell am I going to do now?" And while that's amusing, that is also 100% consistent with what I already knew about Trump going back to instances like that I could talk all day about. But that was my role with the organization there. And it shouldn't be, I shouldn't short sell that role because it was a key role in the casino industry. And in that part, I suppose I am guilty of contributing to that brand. And love him, hate him is the most powerful brand on planet Earth. It wasn't when we started with it, but it's powerful enough that he got elected. That's some serious marketing. That is some serious branding. And I will take some credit for that we were damn good at what we did with the branding. I mean, it wasn't on me. We had an incredible team of people, but you know what? We know what we're doing when it comes to marketing.
Take that credit and run to the hills and shout it from the mountaintop. Now, I want to dive into your television and public engagement. So how did the concept for the television series Casino Rescue come about, and what impact do you aim to achieve through the show?
Wow, you really did your homework. Wow. Okay, so after I left Trump Organization, I started my own company and I was doing development work. I was raising money to build casinos, mostly for tribes. I was training people to operate these casinos, and I was sometimes I would run them, sometimes I'd do marketing for them, but it was all through my own company and a lot of fun. Las Vegas, a friend in Hollywood that really wants to invest in casinos. He's a show business agent and he's got a lot of money and wants to put in casinos. You know, I've heard everything you could possibly hear from investors and invest in casinos. So first of all, I'm skeptical even hearing that in the first place. And then I hear Hollywood and I'm more skeptical. Then I hear he's an agent and I'm like, yeah, right. Okay, whatever. So no, I'm not. I say, sure, I'll talk to him, but I don't. So I never called the guy. And apparently the guy calls my lawyer friend back 5 or 6 times, and I still am not returning the calls. So my lawyer friend, I'm in LA for something, doing something out in LA, who knows what. And I get a call from my lawyer friend, and he said, "Where are you?" I said, "I'm in Los Angeles." He said, "Great, you can go by and see this agent." And I said, "Dude, I don't want to go see this damn agent." He said, "How long is it going to take? Go have lunch with him today, and if you don't like what he has to say, then leave." I said, I don't have any lunch plans. I'll meet him. The guy's name's Alan Morrell. So he says, "Okay, go see Alan Morrell at this restaurant." So I go to the restaurant, and the restaurant, first of all, is Spago on Rodeo Drive, Beverly Hills. I'm like, okay, that's cool. So I'm going to get a good meal anyway. What the heck? So I go in and I say, I'm supposed to see, and I've got a sheet of paper here, Alan Morrell. And the maitre d' says, "Oh, Mr. Morrell is at his private table." And I'm going, "Hey, dude has a private table." All right. That's cool. So I go in and I introduce myself. And he says to me, "Look, I have a confession to make." First thing he says, "Okay." He said, "I'm not interested in investing in a casino." And I'm like, "Yeah, well, tell me something I didn't know." And I said, "Well, then why are we meeting?" And he said, "Well, I've done a lot of research on you. You're a real character, and I'd like to represent you." And I said, "Dude, you want to represent me?" "Yeah, right. I'm not really in show business anymore. No, I don't need it." He said, No, I can be your agent and can do a lot." And so I said, "Let me go wash my hands. Excuse me." So I used it as an excuse. I go in the bathroom and pull up my cell phone. And I call a friend of mine who's a He's a very well-known actor in Hollywood. He's been in 70 some odd movies. So I call him and I say, hey, man, you ever heard of an agent named Alan Morrell? And my friend says, well, of course I have. And I said, seriously? And he says, yeah, of course. Everybody knows Alan Morrell. And I said, well, I don't. I'm having lunch with him now. And he says, wait a minute. You're having lunch with Alan Morrell? Man, I know people that would kill to get to have lunch with Alan Morrell. He's like the biggest agent out here. So I go back and I sit with the guy and start talking to him. And so let me tell you about some of the people that Alan has represented over the years. He represented Sinatra. He represented the Rolling Stones. Here's my favorite funny one. When Pope John Paul did his book tour, he represented the Pope. Yeah, he represented Billie Jean King. He also represented Bobby Riggs. That famous tennis match between the two of them, the whole thing was a setup that Alan orchestrated from the beginning. I mean, this guy's for real. So I'm like, okay, you want to represent me? Have at it, do what you can for me. I'm all in. You just run with it. He says, okay, I will. We finish lunch. I fly back to Florida. I'm chuckling about it because I know nothing's ever going to come of it. About 2 weeks later, I get a call from him. And he says, are you in Florida? I said, yes, sir. He said, well, I'm landing in Fort Lauderdale in 4 hours. Can you pick me up at the airport? I go, great. Now I'm a taxi service. Yeah, okay. I'll drive down to Fort Lauderdale and pick you up. So I go pick him up at the airport. And he says, okay, so I brought a contract for you. I said, a contract for what? He said, your book. It's Jack here. You're writing a book about the history of Indian casinos, how they came about and what they're all about. I need to write a proposal and an outline. No, this is the contract for the book. You've got to have it delivered in 90 days. As a book contract, it's 90 days later, I'd finished, less than 90 days, about 60 days later, I'd finished the book. And the darn thing was published and sold a shitload of copies. It's a book called Osceola's Revenge, The Phenomena of Indian Casinos. And it's the history of how Indian casinos exist and my role over the years with them. So I'm thinking, okay, dude is an agent. How about that? So then he calls me and he says, look, I've been talking with 2 different networks and I've got them in a bidding war for you. And they're going to do your television show. Once again, Alan, what television show? And Alan says, yeah, you got a casino. We're going to do a show called Casino Rescue. You're going to go around to different casinos around the country and tell them what they're doing wrong and fix them up. Just like Restaurant Impossible or Hotel Impossible or Bar Rescue or those shows. And I said, well, Alan, look, here's the thing. Those shows go into these mom and pop businesses. And the attraction is the host comes in and screams at the people and tells them they're morons, and only he can save the day. That's not the way a multi-billion-dollar casino works, either in corporate America and especially not in Indian country. Some white guy coming in saying, oh, yeah, you're stupid. You need to do it this way. It don't work like that. And he said, well, I've already got the network sold on it. I said, well, there's no casino in the world going to agree to that shit. Rethinking the show. And he says, well, what if you did a show called Casino Insider? And what you do is you go into these different casinos around the country and you show the behind the scenes, what's really going on. That'll give you a chance to talk about the stuff you did with Trump. How do you get players in there? How do you get inside the minds of players? How do you get the players to part with their paychecks to gamble? And what's going on? What's the drama behind the scenes? And I said, you know what? That is an interesting show. That is a show that we can do. So we revamped and worked around that concept of being Casino Insider to go around the country and doing that. We started for the pilot, shot a pilot, a really cool old casino built by the mob back in the 1940s. We shot the pilot up there. And the last day of filming of the pilot was the day before all U.S. airports shut down for COVID. And the producer of the show, showrunner of the show, was from Canada. He had to get the hell out of the country. Everything went on hold. And in fact, it's only this year, 2025, that we've started talking about revamping the show one more time, because we've still got at least one of us Still want to give you money. What we're in the process of doing right now is revamping it a little bit further. Alan's concept that we talked about of going to different casinos, one reason that he liked that concept is in the 1970s and 80s, Alan had done a show called, he had produced a show called The Lifestyles of the Rich and Famous. And they traveled around the country to, you've probably seen reruns of it or seen it on YouTube. They traveled around to different places. Well, that was his show and he liked that concept. So he wanted to do it with casinos. But what we've started thinking about now and what we're going to do for the current version of the show is we are going to go into a smaller casino, buy that casino outright, and then develop it into using all of these marketing techniques and all of these financial techniques and develop it into a major casino property, show how the publicity is done, show how the players, how it benefits the players and the owners, and then flip that bad boy and do some other casinos. And so that's the current concept of the new show, which is Casino Insider. And we are actively putting that together as we speak now. So that is still alive. And we would have probably done the original version had it not been for COVID, but stuff happens. Anyway, so that's the TV thing. And you know, I've been doing television. My first television appearance was in 1957 when I was in kindergarten. And I was on we were living in Atlanta and I was on a local TV kids show there. And I've been doing television off and on for 60 years, 70 years. I mean, I've been doing television a long time. So we also, and I didn't talk about this, but we had a casino in Oklahoma, native casino in Oklahoma that I was the CEO of the property. And I was also the face of their advertising. So I was on all the billboards and I did the television commercials, and those TV commercials won an Addy. Addy is the national awards of the advertising industry for the most creative television commercials for the year. And we won an Addy for our series of commercials. We did a series, you can find these on YouTube, I'm sure. We did a series of commercials called I'm Stealing Las Vegas and Bringing It to Oklahoma. And it was a fun little series. So I've been doing TV a lot. So, excuse me, getting makeup, getting wardrobe, you know, it's old hat. So TV's fun. I like to do it. And as you can tell, the biggest challenge for my producer and for my manager is to shut me the hell up. Because as you can tell, if you get me started on a topic, I will talk for 1 hour and 44 minutes nonstop until I either pass out or cough or something. Congratulations, you've done that to me.
Now we have your books, Marketing Donald Trump, which you went over.
I also have my new one. I'm gonna do a shameless pitch there. The Legend Dies On. And that is, you know, my Donald Trump book is out of print right now because we're working on a new Trump book. I have 9 books that are out there floating around somewhere on Amazon. But the current book is The Legend Dies On. It just came out about 6 months ago. It just came out in paperback for Christmas. And there's a guy reading it right now to do an audio book of it for Audible. And believe it or not, there's a graphic novel comic book version that's going to be out this month, which I'm psyched about because I collect comic books. So I'm really psyched about that. This book, The Legend Dies On, this conversation I've had with you is an excerpt from The Legend Dies On. It is my life story beginning at childhood all the way through the current times, talking about everything I've done, but in a lot more detail. I mean, it's a thick book and going into a lot of detail about it and telling all the dirty secrets behind it as well. We called it The Legend Dies On because all these people keep saying I'm legendary and I keep making fun of them. And, you know, the phrase is the legend lives on. Again, rolled my eyes and said to me, yeah, in this case, the legend dies on. Give me a break. And so it's a smart-ass, tongue-in-cheek title to it. But it also, I mean, it's very real and carries a serious tagline to it. I mean, the tagline above it says he wrote songs powerful enough to get him killed, and they almost did. And as you know, that's really true. It is a Roman Cliff novel book, which means that in the style of Truman Capote and others, I have changed the names of the guilty to protect the innocent, meaning that I have novelized a lot of the things that happened because I don't want to be sued for $636 million again. and B, there are some people who just deserve to have their privacy protected. And my life has been so over the top that it invades people's privacy. And I don't want to do that to them. So I changed some names in here, and I also took some things out of sequence. But beyond those two things, changing names, leaving some people out. For example, my family, I have two brothers and some other family, and they hate publicity. I mean, they freak out on publicity. So I deliberately left them out of the book, though they play huge roles in my life. And I couldn't have done any of these things without their roles in my life. But to protect people, I took people out of it. I changed some names, changed some sequences. But other than that, the book's 100% accurate. And it's the true sad story or silly story of me. And like I said, there are 9 books out there. This is number 9. And we're actually working on number 10, which is a revamp of my Marketing Donald Trump book. That Marketing Donald Trump book is actually, it's more of a textbook than it is a trade paper, in that it actually tells you 1, 2, 3, here are the steps to make yourself a success, regardless of whether you're selling Cheerios or time and chair and casino seats or the Summit podcast. It's a marketing 1, 2, 3 of how to do it, how to reach people, and how to follow up.
Now, you also have your book, The Gambling,
which is also out of print. That was an early attempt that I did to take. There are so many behind the scenes stories at casinos that you can talk about the crazy stuff that goes on in the casino world. I mean, there is stuff that goes on in the hotel casino industry that if you think about it, you would probably say, oh yeah, I guess so. But the general public just doesn't realize it, doesn't think about stuff that goes on. So in the Gambling Man book, I tried to take a lot of those anecdotal things and put them together. I'll tell you, the book, each chapter I think is written well, but there's no good flow from chapter to chapter because it's more like a series of short stories. In the hotel rooms places we do in casinos, at least one person a week, maybe more, that dies in their hotel room. There's a dead body in that room. I mean, you wouldn't think about it, but of course it happens. Welcome to the world. But that's some weird crap that happens. I mean, that you don't think about. Once that happens, how do we deal with it so that the general public doesn't freak out about it? And then I throw in all kinds of other little silly casino things. Like, for example, next time you go into a casino hotel, look at the elevator. We don't have 13th floor. It will go 12, 14, 15. Because 13 is an unlucky number. Nobody wants to stay on the 13th floor of a casino if you're gambling. It's just like if you're staying on the 6th floor of a hotel, there's no room 666 because people won't stay in room 666. There's a lot of little silly stuff like that I put into that book because it's fun behind the scenes stuff. Since that book is out of print and I probably won't revamp that book, those are the kind of things that we're putting into the Casino Insider TV show, where I can not just talk about it, but show concrete examples of it. And, every now and then I'll go to a casino that is being operated by somebody that hasn't been in the business before, and it'll have a 13th floor in the casino. I'll just crack up and I'll eventually ask them, do a lot of people stay on that floor? No, nobody. People always move from that floor. Well, you dumbass. By the way, what Trump did at least one of his properties, and probably more. There is a belief among patrons that the higher floor in a hotel you're on, the more luxurious that floor is, right? So in one of his properties, the first floor of hotel rooms was actually the 5th floor. But in the elevator, we put 14 on it. And we made the time on the elevator that it took to get from the ground floor to the first floor of rooms longer than the time it took to get to the other. So you're thinking, oh, I got to go up to the 14th floor. It was not the 14th floor. It was the 7th floor. So it's all part of the Trump illusion. Another thing that we did in the Trump world, part of the Trump illusion, on the back of the door in the hotel rooms, most states, New Jersey is one of them, most states have a requirement that a hotel has to post on the back of the door the price of that room, the maximum price of that room. So what we would do at the Trump properties, let's say you have a rack room, just regular hotel room, nothing fancy, just our standard rooms. And let's say we sold you that room for the night for, I don't know, $150 you paid for the night for that room. Okay. So you go to the back of the door as a patron there, and you look at the back of the door to see what the price is on that room, $85 a night. Man, you got a good deal. These people at this casino like me. They gave me a deal. Oh, bullshit. We've never charged anybody that in the history of the hotel. But that's what we listed on the door. You know, behind the scenes marketing chicanery that goes on like that. Fun stuff.
That is a lot of fun. Especially on pricing on the back of doors when it comes to the hotel room. And it'll make me question.
We had a death in a hotel room at a native casino, an Indian casino, and everything has to be reported to the tribal council. So I contacted the chairman of the tribe and told him out of the room until he sent a holy man to perform a ritual to drive the evil spirits out of the room. You got to love that behind the scenes stuff. It's a fun industry. There's just some crazy stuff that goes on that I can talk about these all day, and it's why the TV show is so fun, because there's so many crazy things that happen. Yeah, good stuff though. And I appreciate you asking about these, even though I've now taken up 2 hours of your time.
My last question for you, Gary Green, is what advice would you offer to individuals aspiring to pursue a diverse and dynamic career like yours, minus the writing songs and almost getting killed and getting arrested?
Look, this is advice. I hate to even admit all that have given this advice, because Donald Trump is one of this advice, but a lot better people have also given the advice, and it's certainly my advice. No matter how dark it looks, no matter how bad it is, no matter what the heck is going on, don't stop. Whatever your passion is, pursue it. Don't stop. Never, ever, ever, ever quit. Because I truly believe at the very last minute, when you're surrounded and you can't win, cavalry's going to come charging over the hill. You're going to hear that, and they're think about the first Superman movie. Lois Lane is in that helicopter. The helicopter falls to the side of the building, and she is dead. Superman flies up and grabs that helicopter in one hand and Lois in the other hand. That really does happen in life. No matter how down you are, food stamps. The only income I had was standing on the street corner begging for money, playing my guitar, and I can buy casinos today. No matter how far down you are, no matter how stupid things happen, don't ever, ever, ever stop. Keep doing it. As long as you believe in yourself, other people will eventually believe in you too. Keep plugging. That's more than advice. That's a plea to people, because I know people feel despair. They feel totally bummed. They don't know what to do. And even people who have reached a mid-level at a career, they're like, how am I ever going to crack the ceiling and go to the next? And I'll also tell you this, it's exceptionally hard in corporate America. You know that the fix is already in above you. Screw those people. You're better than them anyway. You can go to the next level. You can go beyond them. Never stop pushing. That's it. That's my advice. You have disappeared on me. I can't hear you at all. I've lost you completely.
Can you hear me now?
I hear you now.
Facts. I want to thank you for your time today, Mr. Gary. It was wonderful learning all about you. I look forward to seeing Casino Insider, and I definitely look forward to reading all of your books, including The Legend Dies On. Definitely going to go and get my copy of that, because just hearing your story of how it all started and how you're still pushing forward and doing all these amazing things, it's definitely an inspiration to all. I know you're inspiring to me. And I look forward to continuing to see and read more of what you are doing.
I really appreciate that. And if you will zap me an email, I will send you a PDF copy of the comic book as soon as it comes out, because it's cool.
So, I love comic books. Love them. as a kid, that was like my favorite part of the newspapers was getting the as we called it, the funny section.
So did we. The funny papers. That's what we called them. Right. Very cool. So email me and I'll send it to you. And anybody can email me. It's Gary@GaryGreen.com. I'm easy to find. So thank you again.
Thank you so much. I want to thank everyone for tuning in to the Summit Sessions podcast. I'm your host, Caitlin Natalie Laurent. This was the famous Gary Green. You all have a wonderful rest of your day.